Hi everyone, this is Divided Films, a podcast where we talk about movies where audience and critics don't agree about. And then we talk about those movies and pick a side, whether we side with the critics or the audiences. We're going to figure that out through discussing the movies in depth. My name is JJ, and my co-hosts are Keith and Rob.
Hey guys.
So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite movies, The Mummy. So this is the 1999 Mummy, not the Tom Cruise Mummy from 2017, which I will never see. So what do you guys think initially about The Mummy when we decided we were going to do this and going to watch this movie? Like, what were your thoughts? Were you looking forward to it?
So excited. It's a great movie. It's nothing like, genre breaking, or it's not Citizen Kane.
No.
But when you're looking for a fun summertime popcorn movie, this is the perfect way to do it.
I was so excited
I was
to watch
shocked,
this.
though, that this movie is a part of this podcast because a lot of people, including myself, love this movie, and critics it has a 59% on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics at the time just did not like it.
I thought it was just universally loved.
But granted, it was a box office success. It was nominated for an Academy Award for sound.
For sound, yep.
I kind of want to get into why they didn't like it.
Well, let's take a look at the scores first. Yes. So the critical score is 59%, which is just missing the fresh approval threshold, and then your audience score is a 75%. So mixed with the critics, but fairly a firm good positive with the audiences. And here's just the critics' consensus on Rotten Tomatoes. It's difficult to make a persuasive argument for The Mummy as any kind of meaningful cinematic achievement, but it's undeniably fun to watch.
That's very true.
I think we're all in agreement about that. And it doesn't need to be groundbreaking. Not every movie needs to be groundbreaking. It's just fun. It knows it's fun, and it takes advantage of that. I would also argue it's not like a movie that's aiming low and hitting low like some crummy B movie or anything. There is a craft to this. There is a fun sort of nod to classic Hollywood films, and there is definitely a lot of care with this movie. I would say it's impressive that this movie is able to balance a tone of scary and spooky in a fun way, but also still being fun and action-packed.
Yeah, no, that definitely takes... I was under the impression that it was a very fine line that they walked, and it took a lot of skill, and the pacing with it. I don't think any of the jokes are actually funny in the film, but where they decide to put the jokes and the quickness with which they move from that to action and how invested you are in the characters, it really makes the whole thing work.
It's clever, and it's these kind of jokes... They're not ha-ha, but they're, they make you chuckle, they make you smile. They're it's a very
Brendan Frasier's a charming fellow.
Yes,
he is the heart of that movie.
I totally agree. I mean, Brendan Frasier, definitely I would say carries the movie in terms of he embodies the tone of that sort of intensity, but keeping it light.
And you're right. This movie was made by everyone who made it. Was Stephen Sommers, who was inspired. He loved the 1930s movie with Bela Lugosi so much, and he kind of wanted to do his own take on it. And he directed movies before. He did The Mummy Returns, Van Helsing, G.I. Joe.
This was his first big blockbuster.
This was his first big. He did TV movies back in the early 90s, and this was his first one. And granted, I would say it's his best. But the story itself, I think you got Jerry Goldsmith on music, and he's done
the music was
the music was excellent. The cinematography was the sets.
I want to talk about
an enjoyable movie.
I want to talk about the music. Is one of the most memorable parts for me because you all know what the score is. It's it really keeps that energy going, and it's the music also is able to capture the playfulness at times, and also the more thrilling, intense scenes at other times, or the darker moments. It also kind of rides that fine line. So on both directing, acting, and then on a musical level too, you really are right on that middle ground.
That's the other thing. I think music helped with this, but I remember seeing this as a kid in the theaters, and it's I could follow the entire thing from start to finish, and then watching it again as an adult. I can. It has a different kind of enjoyment, but I mean, to have a movie that's that accessible to people of different ages, I think the music helps. It clues you in on what's going on. The jokes being simple, you can and over the top at times. Like you can follow it, so you know when to laugh and everything. And it's
I miss this kind of movie. You
Yes,
don't get adventure movies that kind of more and I think they all went towards like Uncharted, and I think that's why I like that.
Well, now you
much.
get the 2017 Mummy, where
Exactly.
it's
I wanna ask
like
you about that later on.
dramatic, like building universes.
Perfect contrast between how movies used to be, action movies used to be, and how they are now. You know, like now it's like very serious, very like over the top epic like orchestra score. You know, nothing is
Lots of CGI.
Yeah, like it's not as playful. And granted, the Mummy has, you know, CGI.
It wasn't nominated for special effects.
no, it's not. You know,
I think the CGI was actually really well done for 1999.
Some of it holds up. Some of it's a little cheesier.
There's a few things like the ghost thing that comes out of the water.
That knocks
really
on the moon
strange.
I like that.
That was really odd.
I thought that was like water.
But like when they show the city and everything, and then they chose not to use CGI during the big battle scenes, which I really appreciated. It was, you know, real horses, real actors.
There are some really good action scenes right off the bat. So why do you think maybe critics are more mixed about it? I mean, clearly the audience has had a fun time with this movie, but critics may be a little lukewarm.
I think so much of this movie rides on Brendan Frasier's personality. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think he had just gotten done doing George of the Jungle. He wasn't really that well known.
as well.
Yeah. So like they took a risk putting him in this role. I think they talked about using Tom Cruise. They tried to get him on board. Brad Pitt.
Ironically, Tom Cruise, because he would
go on
Tom
to do the
Cruise,
other one.
Brad Pitt, all the heavy hitters: Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Chris O'Donnell, Matthew McConaughey,
they all turned
and
it down
Leo.
because of scheduling.
Leo actually liked the script, but I think they all would have been awful. And granted, they're all good actors.
But I think that's the reason that the
role.
critics were like, I don't know if people are going to love this guy who's he's very out of place for the 1920s. It's like he's not even trying to mask the fact.
He's the only man who yells at a mummy.
Like it would be a period piece, except Brendan Fraser time traveled back. And he's like, who's the broad?
Yeah, he's like because like, you know, he's a little like you know, on the more rugged side, and at the same time he's not like super like a gross kind of like creepy kind of guy either. Like he kind of is writing like a good sort of, you know, like masculine, like, you know, hero type role.
It's a very Han Solo kind of a character.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like a bit self-aware too, which also helps the movie.
Yeah.
You know, he kind of like, you know, he'll scream back at the mummy, or he'll be kind of, he has that one line where he's like, oh, mummies, you know, like it definitely
I think part of the direction was he was told not to take anything too seriously.
Exactly.
Keep it light.
Yeah, so
it's good to have him back too. I want to get that on the record. It's just good to have, like, he went away for most of the 2000s over like, granted, like all other stuff.
Listeners, make sure you just make a note. Keith is glad that Brendan Fraser's
glad to have you back, Bren.
Mummies.
So let's see some of these reviews again that are like maybe I mean, it's not a ton of like super negative reviews. There's a couple of reviews that are like where like critics are, you know, maybe not a fan of, but then I think a lot of them are kind of also similar to the consensus we read a moment ago, where it's like, you know, this isn't anything like amazing, but it's just fun. I think critics are like that, and you know, maybe critics kind of want more out of movies than just your popcorn fun movie, and you know, audiences maybe are. You know, that's fine. I mean, I personally, I love a movie like this that's just fun, a good time at the movies in the summertime. You know, you just have a good time and you walk out and, you know, and it has a lot of rewatchability too.
Oh, yeah.
And that begs the question, like, what are the critics actually rating? I mean, are they looking for something that's groundbreaking and like, redefines film? Or are they looking for something that, I think this is a good movie in an overall broad
for what it is, sense. You know.
Well, I think a lot of the negative reviews about this movie have two things. One, they compare it a lot to Raiders of the Lost Ark. They wanted it to be as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark,
which is not trying to be.
I don't think it was like Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I did think it was very similar to The Last Crusade. I thought it was very similar to that in the way that there was a lot of like really fun action scenes. There were a lot.
I understand that. Yeah.
There were a lot of jokes like tossed in, but it was just it was a fun movie. It didn't have like some of the serious moments that Last Crusade had, but it still embodied that same kind of spirit.
There must have been a guy outside the movie theaters when the critics were going to see it going, it's as good as Raiders of the Lost Ark. So they went in expecting, no, it's not. No, but that's one of the negative reviews, and also, and more understandably, but the special effects. They also say, like, I think because The Matrix also came out that year, The Matrix, of course, dominated, changed the game in special effects. I still love the effects in The Mummy.
I didn't think they were that bad. I think
they're
they
perfect
still
for
hold
this
up.
movie.
Yeah, I don't have to they don't have to be as good as The Matrix. Again, they don't have to be groundbreaking for this movie.
But that seems to be the main criticisms. And of course, like if someone doesn't like the jokes or whatever, some people don't like the chemistry. I love the chemistry between Rachel and Brendan.
I think they do have really good chemistry. I also, as much as I really like Brendan Frasier, I like Rachel Weisz a lot too. I think
she's perfect as Evie.
I think she's got a really great character. I mean, she's like fun, she's quirky, she like stands up for herself. You know, I think she has a really good character there.
The casting was perfect.
There's a lot of really great.
Every character stands out.
Jonathan,
Even the minor characters.
Benny.
A lot of really great, colorful characters. Yeah, like Benny is a really fun kind of like Weasley villain.
It's a little cartoonish.
We got all
but
the
it
horses.
but it works with the movie.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like I said, it kind of reaches that tone. It's not too cartoony either.
No.
And then, I guess some of the older critics too might be remembering the original Mummy from, I guess, I don't know, the 30s, the 40s.
With Bela Lugosi.
Yeah. So, that I think is a movie that, critics who remember that hold that in a higher regard.
Yeah, here's one from Stephen Holden for the New York Times wrote, "This version of The Mummy has no pretenses to be anything other than a gaudy comic video game splashed onto the screen. Think Raiders of the Lost Ark, with cartoon characters, no coherent storyline, and lavish but cheesy special effects. Think Night of the Living Dead stripped of genuine horror and restaged as an Egyptian-themed Halloween pageant."
That's a little...
It's like, he seems personally...
I think he had fun writing in that, like, he had fun in his movies.
I think his first memory is seeing the original The Mummy and thinking, I want to criticize films. That's what I want to do. And this just wasn't what he was expecting.
Yeah, that's, pretty harsh. I mean, it's not
Pretty
like
harsh.
Egyptian beauty pageant. I think that's kind of funny, but I would not say that's really warranting of this movie. And then you have, the audience is, like I said, very enthusiastic. Here's some, audience reviews on Rotten Tomatoes that are 5 stars. People are saying, this is without a doubt one of my all-time favorite movies. It has everything: action, comedy, romance. Another one that's The Mummy's a classic that does not get the respect it deserves. A movie is great. You can watch it again and again. It's people not only had a fun time watching it, but they have a fun time rewatching it over and over again.
Yeah, this to me, it's like Independence Day. It's like the original Independence Day. If it's on TV, you're gonna watch the whole thing.
Exactly.
If you're flipping through the channels, you're gonna watch it.
I'm happy
While it was hard to find a rotten review in the audience section, I did find one, and this has to be my favorite. This movie is poop. Dirty butt poop. It is so ridiculously lame, oh my god. Someone took the time to dirty butt poop.
A very insightful and well written
oh my
review.
god.
I totally understand. That's the thing too when we go through some of these audience reviews, some of them are very short, they don't really give you an idea whether they're good or bad. Sometimes people just say, love it, great, or hate it, it's dumb, and then no other really insight as to what exactly is the reason.
I was worried on rewatching it that maybe my nostalgia would take over, but there's a lot of rewatchability. You're in for a fun time, and there is a little bit
thrilling. It's a thrilling movie. It has action. It has scary
I do remember
moments.
when I was 9, and when the mummy first comes to life. That's scary. There's some scary stuff back there.
It is scary. And interesting enough, that doesn't really come through.
That's cool.
That comes in about halfway in the movie.
It's an hour in.
And I think that's interesting. The movie does a really good job setting it up. I think the structure of the movie is pretty good. And it's done in a classic Hollywood way. You get that opening sort of back in ancient Egypt, and it's very Hollywood. It's very this is a Hollywood take on ancient Egypt. That's not maybe a lot of historical authenticity, but it's just what you expect to see at a Universal Studios sort of take on Egypt. And I'm fine with that. And, it's very, melodramatic, that opening scene. I really get a kick out of how over the top it is, when they stab the pharaoh and his arms go up
There's also a lot of, exposition. There's a lot of voiceover, just this and this and this, setting things up.
Right, the character, the Medjai character is narrating that whole opening, and then you understand, what his people are trying to, prevent this creature from being discovered.
That was his first on-screen role.
Really?
Yeah. That's a fun fact.
I think in the same year he was in Deuce Bigalow. So
that was his second
good for him.
But it's like from start to finish, I love the sets. Like it's like you're watching movie making.
You feel like you're transported to Egypt. That's
But you're
like
also
I felt
watching-
like in that,
I'm on a
in that
ride.
old it wasn't like a bunch of CG stuff. It took me there in a way that modern movies don't really do.
It does that, but I feel like I can see the director going like he has a big megaphone, like, all right, horse is ready. I love. It's like you
Yeah,
can see the
yeah,
sets,
yeah,
like
yeah.
the boat. It's on that
Yeah.
ocean tank in the like with the green black screen or whatever they were using as the night. And when I watched the trailer to this, I missed the movie man voice, like, in a world where, mummies come alive. And, like, it has that, and, like, you hear the trumpet sound, and, like, I miss movies like this.
There is an ancient legend of a place known as the City of the Dead.
They call it the doorway to hell.
Everything is like so Egypt. Like even when they cut to like the 20s, every joke is like an Egyptian joke. Like even like when Evie knocks down like all those bookshelves, and the curator comes in, he goes like like locusts, and he lists all the plagues of Egypt. Like that would be better than having you. Like all the jokes have to be like Egyptian jokes. Like we are in Egypt and we're not going anywhere else, which I really appreciate. So a lot of credit for like the direction and tone for really capturing that sort of fun, and just the whole story. There's like no really slow moments there. I feel like even in the setup, even though you don't get the mummy until like halfway through, you still get a lot of great action scenes, like the opening battle scene, the boat fire
that
scene.
first act is half the movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting to the mummy is like quite a journey, but I like the journey, and it's still exciting even before the mummy comes. And then when the mummy comes, the tone does get quite darker afterwards. Then the movie really picks up, and you start killing off characters.
It's great because at that point you love all the characters, even the dumb group of Americans. Like you kind
Huey,
of
Dewey,
like
and
them.
Louie is what I call them.
They're kind of generic, but you also like they're distinct. You
the
remember
glasses
them.
guy, and then
you
like,
feel something for them.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. I felt bad that they died. Not too bad, but
You're not horrible. You're not broken
He
up.
needed
about
eyes
it.
and a tongue.
they're going
But
to
you
die.
feel it. You feel like this is the mummy's a real threat.
There are
because
stakes.
There are stakes. He is killing.
I felt bad when the pilot died. I'm like, this guy just wanted to fly planes.
The pilot was a really weird thing. Like
pilot-
last minute, like wrenched him into the plot.
He's not
He has the
introduced
kooky
till after the-
mustache. He has the Teddy Roosevelt thing going on, like buddy.
No, he was fun.
And
too.
then they
I
had
think
like a
everyone
really solemn like burial as he's singing in
as
the
he sings
It was as if he was a character you knew from the beginning. We only
He
saw him in
was-
2 scenes.
I mean, that's like the most shoehorn plot device I've ever
they
heard.
fly him in there.
But at the same time, you don't care though because they did it in like it's not slowing anything down. It's not trying to be. They're not trying to imply that he's more than what he is.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's there so that we can have a planes shot, and that's it.
That's a fun scene too, when like the wall of sand comes and you see the mummy's
Yeah.
face, and he eats the plane, and then like that's a fun scene.
And that's why I think the special effects get a bad rap. They were a little cheesy, but the stuff like that, the stuff they did with the sand where it's making the face, I thought it was good for its time.
I think
it's-
so, too.
I think that's a cool power for the mummy to have. Like they totally knew like what the mummy can and can't do, and like the sand stuff, he can turn into sand. He can like control sand. So like that was kind of cool. Like there's this shot where like Evie's locked in the room and you see the sand coming through the keyhole. Like that's like kind of cool. Or even like any time like he gets scared by the cat and he like just turns into like a whirlwind of sand.
Oh,
and
they
goes out
must
the
have
window.
fun with the mouth, like blah blah blah. Like,
I don't-
They gave him like enough powers where he was it seemed like he was an insurmountable obstacle, but they also didn't make him totally like a god, just able to do anything.
Like you knew you could beat him, but it's like this how though. Like there has to be a way.
Yeah.
So that was all fun. Yeah, the production, like the sets, like I love the Hamunaptra set. I love the City of the Dead. Even like when you first see the ancient Egypt scenes, and then when you see the decayed part, like that all looks like really cool. I think that must have been fun to film in.
The transitions were nice too, because the way they did that whole set. Now by transitions, I don't mean like the double
faded.
blind wipes and because
no,
they
but
had a little bit of that.
I love the
There were a little
credit.
bit of like Star Wars
give it
PowerPoint
credit.
wipes. And
it
stuff.
brought me back to a time like I'm watching like a 70s B movie and I'm
Yeah.
having a lot of fun. Like
No, but I mean when they like fast forward through the years and they do it while they're like revolving around the statue.
Yeah, that was cool. You see the
like that,
statue
yeah.
age. Yeah, that was pretty cool. cool.
It doesn't slow anything down. The pacing was really well done.
Yeah, it keeps going and going, and like, if it's not like thrilling, then you're getting some funny dialogue or just some sweet scenes too. I think the scene where Evie's kind of drunk and falling
character
over.
building.
That's all fun.
Growing,
it's not that doesn't slow down the movie at all. Because you do like the characters. It's affectionate.
And throughout this movie, how it's going to end. You know that they're going to beat the mummy. You know that they're going to fall in love and everything. But you have no idea how they're going to get there.
It's so fun, right? Yeah. Even when they kill the mummy, the thrill's still not over yet, because then the city starts to get destroyed, and they have to and that's cool too. Like the booby traps. Like I love the booby traps. I love having to avoid these obstacles and everything's falling on them. Like it never ends. There's just once you beat one thing, there's nothing around the corner. The beetles are the
scarabs.
The scarabs. Well, I always thought
you can call them beetles.
Yeah, it's whatever. Scarabs. They're that's a classic. Everyone remembers those from both movies.
How funny would it be if you got 500 emails after you?
They're scarabs. You idiot.
Beetles. You know nothing.
So it seems like with all the critics that didn't like it, and from what we read, it just sounds so malicious. But the one critic who completely understood this movie was the late and great Roger Ebert.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's this is granted this movie has flaws. This movie's not perfect.
His review is so funny because it's almost like he's trashing the movie, and then he admits that he was thoroughly entertained.
There's a lot of backhand comments.
He's like, it shouldn't have worked, but it did.
But were people, I guess people were expecting it to be this cinematic Citizen Kane, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then when it did not reach that level, they're like, well, this stinks. That's what I think a lot of the negative critics come from. Because time has evidently showed us that
they compare it to a lot of other movies. Again, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, the original Mummy, where it's okay, this does not hold up like those. But it's not trying to.
They still describe it on Wikipedia. It's classified as an action horror flick, and I don't think that's what it is at all. It's an action comedy or
action adventure comedy.
Action adventure, yeah.
Yeah, it is totally like adventure. That's the first word I would say to describe it as an adventure film. And just because there are elements that are, I guess, kind of scary, but they're not horror scary. They're spooky, roller coaster scary. If you're going through a haunted house or something, the scene where the guy when his glasses break and he's in the corridor and it's tilted angles and it's all smoky and stuff. You feel like you're there with them, and you feel like this is one of those haunted pyramids. You turn around the corner and then a mummy's there to scare you.
My glasses,
I like that.
Guys, my glasses. And you know what's gonna happen, but you enjoy every as soon as a character loses his glasses in a movie, he my glass. What a nerdlinger.
I love too when Benny steps on his glasses is a great orchestra boom boom boom.
Yeah, you close up on his face.
Yeah, the music, it's almost like Peter and the Wolf, the way the music follows the action so literally. I feel like you could just listen to the score and you would know exactly where you were in the movie.
Exactly. I can even imagine the music during the final battle scene when they're killing those even in more intense mummies, and there's even a great cheesy shot of Brendan Frasier hitting a mummy's head a baseball right at the screen.
Exactly what you're talking
and
about.
that kind of I think epitomizes the movie because it comes right at the camera, screaming at the camera. You go into its mouth, and it's that's the kind of cheesy fun that this movie's delivering, and it delivers it very well.
Or a good example is when he can't quite reach the sword and he's about to get smushed by a mummy with a rock, and the hand comes along and grabs it, and then he grabs the hand.
I think the lesson I took from this movie and most movies is if you find the Book of the Dead, don't read it.
Yeah, no,
I think of a Evil Dead.
I did realize
a creepy looking book.
I think this is the first time I realized that it was all Evie's fault.
Yes,
all Evie's fault.
Well, she's the one. They open up because a lot of things.
Don't read from the book.
A lot of things have to happen for this mummy to come back to life. Because first of all, someone has to open the mummy's casket. No one opens that thing. He's not getting out of there.
Right. Those poor people too. The salt acid.
Send
the pawns.
You have to get the chest and open the chest so that mummy has someone to eat. And someone has to read from the book to make him alive. So a few things have to happen, which all do. And I said,
you do use the same key for the book in his coffin. So
yeah.
It's not two separate keys.
It's dare I say a skeleton key. All right, thanks for joining us, guys. Okay.
This is where they drop out. They must have been so proud when they made that key. Either on the prop set or even.
I like that.
Cool. I like that it was a little puzzle box.
It's just a little puzzle box, and it comes with.
And there was a different one for the gold book, the Book of the Living, or the Book of Anubis. Is a different key you have to find for that one.
I thought that was the same key.
They look the same, but You need the black key for the black book and the gold
No,
key
it
for
was
the
the
gold
same.
book.
It was the same key for.
No,
both.
they needed it was a
'Cause
universal key. I thought for anything mummy.
But no, they say because like Jonathan, when he's like trying to read from the book of the living, he's like, I need the key, and they're
And,
like,
yeah, and the mummy
they-
has it because the mummy took back the other
It's,
key.
I'm telling you, it's a different key.
No, it's the same
No, I
key.
thought it was
All
the
right,
same
listeners,
key.
you
It's the
tell
same
us.
key.
All right.
I'm pretty sure it's
Tell
a
us
different
why
key.
JJ's wrong.
There's a
It's the
gold
same
key for the gold
Let's
book.
just discuss this for the next half an hour.
This is our show, the mystery of the key.
Guys, I found the key.
Which key is the key?
No! You must not read from the book!
Now, Rob, I wanted to ask you. Now, we all agree, and I'm hoping that a majority of our listeners
The few out
agree with
there.
us. Agree with us that they love
don't,
this
they're
movie.
idiots.
Why?
Stop listening. We don't want you.
I remember when you we talked about you seeing the 2017 Mummy, and you're like, I hate this.
Oh, you
and
did
everyone
see
I
it.
know who
I
saw
did
it,
see it.
everyone I know who saw it said this is the worst movie I've ever seen. Why does that movie fail?
All right, I have to dig through my memory a little bit because I did not just recently
Wait,
rewatch
wait,
this.
wait.
But I mean, it was.
We don't want to talk about it too much. I'm just so curious why this movie, of course, works.
Like I said before, it was they're trying to boot up. I don't know if they're still doing it, but the whole
No, they're not.
The whole universe of
The dark
monsters,
universe and-
and
yeah.
it was done so dramatically and with so many like them trying to convince you that a situation is suspenseful and that you care about characters that you really don't care about. And the whole thing sort of hinged instead of like this movie where you know where you're going to end up at the end, but you have no idea how you're going to get there and you're enjoying the ride.
Yeah.
That movie was more like, oh yeah, well surprise, we're going to like throw some twists your way so that you can't guess the ending, but at the same time you don't really care.
Was it
It was
fun?
It was not fun. They had some impressive shots of, you know, them falling out of planes. They had CGI monsters, but you didn't care about anything while it was happening. And it's so easy to see through what they were doing when they tried to. They had Russell Crowe in there as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like
Ugh.
they teased that a little bit.
See, the franchise building thing really gets on my nerves because, first of all, not everything. Thanks to the MCU, which I'm a big fan of, we're gonna get all these crappy movie universes that are totally unnecessary.
the monster universe.
The monster
Who thought
universe-
that this would work.
You know, the dark universe.
So the producers of the 2017 Mummy basically looked at this version of the Mummy and said, "We don't want any of this. No fun. No, like we want dark.
Basically.
We want."
I
But
mean,
that's the state
they
of
just
movies.
did everything.
There is
opposite.
nothing. There's nothing anywhere similar at all to the Brendan Fraser Mummy.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
that's a
I
shame.
think that says a lot. Like the why that movie. That's not going to be on the podcast because both critics and audiences hated it alike.
Rightfully
It was a little
so.
bit. I hate to say it, but it was a little Van Helsing like, where it was trying to be a very serious, somber like kind of movie, and that's not what you were. That's not the story that you were really working with.
Okay.
No, you can't take it too seriously. I
Yeah.
mean, the idea of a mummy is kind of silly.
Yeah.
You know, like these sort of like zombies wrapped up in tissue paper. So you can make it like the 1999 version, where you make it like just a little bit threatening, but you know you can hack them apart pretty easily. There's just a lot of them. Or yeah, you can make them like the 2017 version, where you're supposed to be like super scared and super serious.
And
but
it's
you
like,
can't
you know,
take it serious.
she ends up in a situation. All of a sudden, she has another power that she can use to get out of it, and it's like,
I like like I don't know how critics could think this movie take this movie seriously when Brendan Fraser holds up a cat and the mummy goes "Rah!" Like I grant the mummies are afraid of cats. Sure, I get it.
I didn't care about.
I didn't care. No, I'm having fun. It's part of it. But you
didn't
do
make
go
any
like.
sense. The pilot showed up like, by the way, I'm a pilot, and then like 5 minutes later, he's like, well, I gotta fly you over, and then they get rid of him right away.
As this movie gets, I'm along for the ride.
Yeah,
and
I'm totally
loving
on board.
it.
I'm totally on board.
I don't think I can give that to every movie. Like there's some like.
You know, a lot of
I don't
it
think
was
I can do that for
like
every
they're a lot of the interactions with different characters. Like they're setting up jokes, but at the same time they're building the characters and showing you the relationship. It's a little bit. It reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean a little bit. The first one, where they're like doing a lot of things at the same time, so that it's, you know, in a short amount of time you get a lot of the world and you know, the different interactions.
Yeah,
that
the
people
banter
are.
is a lot of fun. And yeah, it's a good comparison maybe to Pirates of the Caribbean, where like the most humorous parts are like these characters kind of like taking shots at each other, and that's always also how you get to kind of know their relationships.
It's like efficient storytelling, which is why it feels like you're just doing all
They
these
really
things.
captured light.
It's only 2 hours long, but it feels like so much happens in that movie.
yeah,
And they really captured lightning in a bottle like they did with the Pirates movie. And I, like Johnny Depp with Pirates, I think a lot of that has to do with Brendan Fraser.
A lot of it was Brendan Fraser. He did
I
a really
think,
good job.
and granted, everyone is great. Everyone fits their parts well. But I think there's something really, like, this movie is the success that this movie made a lot of money.
Yeah,
domestic wise, this
Yeah.
was before we cared about like what China gives us and all that. Like as soon as Universal, as soon as
15 million,
the movie was released, Universal called Stephen Sommers and said, "We need another one." Like they knew they had something on their hands, and
Yeah.
maybe they took it a little too far with the third. With
Mummy Returns. You know, I remember enjoying that a lot more. Maybe not as much in hindsight as the first one. But there's again, it's
they
still
expanded
fun.
it. The Rock was just starting out.
Yeah. I think,
But I'm talking about the China
the Chinese
one.
Mummy.
I remember I used to, and I watched the openings, the theme song. They used to, as soon as the Mummy came out, they had a WB TV show of the Mummy.
No.
I'll
Really?
roll clip, and then this is where you guys all agree that like, oh yeah,
Wow, that was really something. I didn't know that existed.
no, but it's really kind of Rick, Evie, Jonathan, and they had a kid in this.
was this a cartoon or a live action
This was
show?
a WB that ran for like from 2001 to 2003.
Now you're not mixing that up with the Jackie Chan adventures, are you?
No, they probably
Okay.
ran back to back. But this one was called
making
like
sure.
this was the Mummy something of the Magi or something.
Wow, I don't remember this
But
at all.
for a while, America was caught up in mummies.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Again, like this first one really kind of like sparked, I guess, maybe an overall interest in these like classic movie monsters. But I don't think any of them were as successful as this one. I do have to say though,
Which is surprising.
Looking back, if I also had to maybe see another thing that critics might have had an issue with was maybe some of the racial stereotyping of the Arab characters. Like you have these kind of background extras of like, you know, like the local, I guess, like Egyptians who like are like work, or they come along with the Americans to do all the dirty work, but they solely exist to be killed in terrible ways, just so you can see like
Like the guy who dies by the scarab. I
Yeah.
think is so racially serious. He does the like he does
That's such an interesting moment because it's like they wanted someone to do it and they're like, well, it's pretty racist. I know. We'll have the Arab character do it, and then you'll feel less bad about him dying because he's kind of racist towards his own people.
yeah, I guess they made him a jerk.
And then
Yeah,
people like
that's
do like
a
the
little-
set like a lot of people joke about the when Rick kisses like come here.
Yeah.
Mwah, I think it's just granted it's now, but I
would
think
not-
even like in the times it's just like movie Harrison Ford Han Solo type stuff.
Yeah.
Like he is a Han Solo type.
I
That's
definitely do not want to see
agreeing with
some
it.
sort of like retrospective like Huffington Post article about like 30 things offensive about the 1999 Mummy that do not hold up anymore. I do not want to see that. I do not want people, like, don't get me wrong, like measuring this in like
You have
a
to say,
certain lens.
I feel terrible using the expression like for its time, but I mean it was a different time, you know.
And like
You
yeah,
watch it in
People didn't
retrospect.
notice that stuff as much. Yeah,
We have different perspectives now, and we go.
It doesn't
okay.
excuse it, but
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
we
It doesn't
weren't where
excuse
we
it.
were now. Like
We've
back
come a
then.
long way since
Yeah.
1999.
Yeah.
Like Marilyn Manson was at the top of his game. The
Take me
Phantom
back.
Menace.
take me
like,
back, Keith, to 1999.
Well, Steve Jobs was just coming. He just was back at Apple. And,
All right, we're cutting all of this
Okay.
out.
Goodbye, Benny.
I guess we're pretty much in agreement here about the Mummy, that we really like, and I guess audiences, you know, we're I guess we'll say we're on the side of the audiences here, and critics, you know, we're just being a little more harsher, which I guess is like an ongoing trend. Typically, critics are more harsh on movies than audiences are, which is, you
you
know,
seem a little harsher on this one, though.
Right. I would hope, you know, like more of them maybe should have had a Roger Ebert perspective where, you know, you're considering like, you know, what is this movie trying to do? You know, people enjoy these kind of silly popcorn movies.
I wonder what Gene Shalit thought. I like it. You'll get wrapped up in the Mummy.
Yeah, I feel like they weren't. I mean, because this was kind of its own kind of movie at the time. So I just wonder if like the early critics saw it and they said no way, like they're never going to get on board, and then they started to see the reaction to it and started to look at it in a different light, and some of them sort of came back, but. I mean, it was a risk. I see this and I go, wow. If I saw this by myself and like I was the first one, I don't know how other people would take it.
I think
I would love it, but
I think if you read the script, that's when you're really like, like it's gonna be tough to make this work.
Yeah.
Or even like if we talk about just from breaking things down, like just the premise. If you had to sum up the premise of this movie. You could say like in an homage to classic horror movies or like creature features, an adventure to like a mummy tomb that involves like a mummy brought back to life, and now these like in a sort of like horror adventure, you have to kind of defeat this mummy that's killing people. Like that's kind of maybe like a loose premise of this movie, which if you're selling it to and people are not yet on board with this nostalgic, like homage genre, I guess it might be hard to sell that. But if you were to hear that premise without having seen the movie, like, do you think that'd be a premise that like you'd be excited about without knowing what the product was?
But then it begs the question, like, how much does the logline premise really matter?
Right.
I mean, it's the same thing. It's the same thing with Independence Day. Independence Day sounds like bonkers. How's this going to work? Mm-hmm. But when you can do it in a way that you fall in love with the characters and you have a fun plan for them to get from point A to point B, it really doesn't matter what your movie's about. It can be anything. The
premise is just really the hook, and you can make any sort of idea or premise for the most part can be done well. It's just this is maybe one where you don't really truly know what you're going to get from that initial premise.
I think if I saw a trailer now, and granted, if it was updated, we don't do the movie trailer voice anymore. But if I saw a trailer now, it would pique my interest.
The trailers, I think, would probably do better, justice because you can, include the music. You can like get those kind of funny moments and action moments and get a better sense of it.
I'm interested in what, because I don't remember what the trailer. I haven't looked at the trailer, but did it reveal how like funny and kind of hokey it was, or was it very much like this is a serious adventure through
both.
Journey with us through the
they're like in ancient Egypt, Egyptians did this, and then they show like the flashbacks, like the opening.
I'm pretty sure
then they go like what it's a little bit of both because you get like Brendan Frasier.
Brendan
Frasier is Rick O'Connell.
Because then I was thinking if they were trying to market it like it's this serious like horror mummy film,
they do both.
And then you go to it and you're like, well, that wasn't what they said it was. Then I could understand.
They show both Imhotep doing the mouth like and they also show like Brendan Frasier is Rick O'Connell and then a quip.
Okay.
So it I think if they took that trailer now, I would be very interested to see it because
I think both the initial trailer and the movie opens like with the Universal logo and that sort of like da-na-na-na-na-na, like that kind of like Egyptian sort of like cheesy sort of like sound effect that just kind of that perfectly sets the tone for what you're about to get into. So if they were able to do that, then it's like, okay, audience know what they're getting into. It's just like I said, that initial premise might be a little tough to sell until you see it.
I'll have you know, gentlemen, that our feelings about this movie and many other people's feelings have been validated because to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the film's release, several media outlets praised the film. Reviewers of Thrillist and Den of Geek call it a perfect movie. Editors of Rotten Tomatoes call it the Indiana Jones for a new generation. Junkie declared it, not a junkie, but a junkie declared it a pivotal blockbuster of the 90s. And Collider and Sci-Fi or Wire praised Brendan Frasier. So it looks like this movie's time has been so well to this movie.
I guess now kind of maybe some of the criticisms people had initially are the opposite, because if people were saying in 1999, like, Brendan Fraser's a low-rent Indiana Jones, now they're saying, like, this is a new Indiana Jones for a new... Like, now they're kind of comparing it favorably.
Well, for every 10 people that like it, there's one that calls it dirty butt.
Well, thankfully none of those people...
Get out of here.
There's none of those kind of people here. So, yeah, I mean, with the story structure of the movie... there are things you have to give it credit for. You can, on the surface, we all agree it's like a funny, cheesy action adventure. But, there's, I think, a lot of craft to this that you have to give it credit. Again, we talked about the story structure. I think the pacing is really good. I like how they set up the story, and then you don't even realize that the mummy comes so late into the movie because you're having so much fun, and then when the mummy comes, it picks up. So I think structurally it worked really well. Tonally.
Yeah, the action scenes, like at the end, how they're each doing their own sort of thing, and then it all comes together. It's just fun.
Yeah, I think
it's fun to watch that like mousetrap sort of system happen.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of just it was very like competently made, not to like use like a very like basic sort of compliment as like backhandedly, but you just could tell that these people knew what they were doing.
I didn't realize upon the rewatch that Benny gets it rough.
Benny gets it pretty bad.
Benny, I'm laughing along, and then all of a sudden, like,
and that's a point I want. That's a point I want to bring up. I like how this movie, for all the gruesome violence that is in this movie, most of it is off camera. It's implied. So a lot of times when like these characters are getting sucked dry, you're either seeing like a shadow get sucked dry, or you're seeing like someone's perspective and they're like cringing at it.
It's scary without being like gory. Without being.
Well, when Imhotep gets stabbed,
you don't see.
I noticed.
Let me just say, his death scene is so funny. The way he's like so shocked and he's staggering back into the pool.
And for some reason,
I always love it when the ghosts like take away, like no.
They take away his like his power,
and he doesn't seem to realize what's happening. He probably should have been like, I may not be as strong as I was before, but he just walks right in.
But you're in like a PG-13 movie when you get stabbed and there's no wound at all, like no blood coming off. He's just like, okay.
He walks around for what seems like 5 minutes, stumbling around.
That's a great. And again, that's a nod to like how old Hollywood movies. You don't actually see any violence. It's just implied violence. Even like in the beginning when they're like torturing Imhotep and all of his priests, you just hear moanings and stuff, and like they're doing terrible things. You don't actually see it, and then like you see a shot of Imhotep's tongue about to be cut out, but then someone walks in front of the camera. Like little things like that. I actually really kind of get a kick out of.
It's more unnerving because it's letting you imagine the rest of it, and
it's a movie that's fun for the whole family.
Horror, even though this isn't even horror, and they're doing horror pretty well.
Like some horror elements, and it would be totally out of tone to see like someone's tongue ripped out or have their flesh sucked off their bones. Like that is not really something that would fit in with the rest of the movie. So it's smart how they kind of like
the design of the mummy when they first open the coffin, like it's kind of juicy. It kind of has parts, and the jaw is like really weirdly open.
Yeah, like kind of like
so
distended.
It's disturbing, but it's not over the top. Gross. They don't have the idea maggots all over the place.
Scared me as a kid.
They're
just crawling into your skin, and you just see it. And
when the first guy gets killed, you see it like crawling under his skin. That kind of like makes you squirm, but again in a fun way. And then
I always love when Jonathan gets his and Rick cuts it out, and there's never any.
And he
blood.
shoots it with a gun.
There's no blood at all. Yeah, and then he has the aim to shoot this little fetal with a gun.
He shoots
notifying the mummy that they're there.
He shoots everything in this movie. I think when they're at the end, he shoots the light, and the light.
Yeah, I remember that. Like there was no reason you could have destroyed that mirror, and it would have been dark the entire time.
You should save a bullet there, but he shoots everything, and I love him all the more for it.
I mean, even when he blasts the mummy initially, he blasts him with a shotgun, and he's like, "I got him." But then when they leave, you see the mummy kind of get up, and it's almost played kind of like funny, like, "Oh no, he's still alive."
Yeah, it's a little cartoonish.
Yeah, exactly. But I said the music also does a good job of capturing that.
I think other directors, and I'll just get to this quick point: Clive Barker, Joe Dante, and George Romero, and Wes Craven were offered. And this would have been entirely this movie would have been a horror movie.
Can you imagine if Wes Craven did this movie?
That's interesting because that was him coming off of like Scream, I imagine, just prior to like.
Wes, we got another movie for you. You like mummies, right?
But you know what? Like I don't know, because Scream is like has comedic moments in it as well. That is like a horror movie, but I feel like maybe it would have been more on the horror level, but you still might have had elements of fun.
I think Steve Sommers did an excellent job with this.
Oh, fantastic!
I think this movie, time has rewarded this movie.
Yeah, I think again, it's played with a very steady hand, and again, like the production value. I mean, it looks really great. The sets are really fun. There's also like I always got the shot when you first see Hamanatra appear out of nowhere, like they're waiting for the sunset. Like I get a kick out of that.
I didn't understand. So they have to wait for so the sun has to be up. And then a mirage forms, and then it becomes Hamunaptra, and they can physically go there, but it's invisible at night.
I don't know.
So
how
someone's
it
like
works.
walking into something like.
Yeah, I didn't understand how the city works.
I have no idea how it works. I just thought it was cool.
Because they got there and they're both like, oh, I'm gonna beat you there. I bet I'm gonna win. But they need to wait for the sun to be up. So that the mirage.
It's kind of like the starting gun to a race. It's like, and go.
It would have made more sense if a mirage disappeared that was blocking the city.
Maybe that's what it was.
But it was literally nothing. It was open desert, and then
I
as soon
see.
as the sun comes
Maybe
up,
there's like a mountain.
surprise, there's a giant city.
Yeah.
I should just get this out. When I was watching it, Evie and Jonathan, they're all racing. Everyone's racing to the pyramid, whatever, and our heroes are on camels, and they're out racing an army of horses. In the back of my mind, I actually typed in my phone. I'm like, are camels faster than horses?
I don't know.
And camels would be better suited for
And
sand.
Google was like, you're
good
watching
point.
The Mummy, aren't you? But
Really?
no, but it
You
does.
can't fool me.
Ads on Facebook for The Mummy.
It does say that horses are twice as fast as camels.
Really?
And granted, that didn't take me
Regardless
out
of
the movie.
terrain.
But I'm like, they're really far ahead of these people with a vast array of horses.
But you know what? Like
But
those
I-
camels were like the underdogs in that race. So you.
I want to see their
movie.
movie.
I totally
Camels.
bought it. I totally bought it. It's like
That you don't care about logic.
No,
in that movie.
no,
You really,
but
you
in
really
the back of
don't.
my head,
Like,
those
they can do
camels,
anything.
are just like they're going as fast as the
But
director
that's
wants
really
them
the
to.
best thing. I mean, because I
That's not a
appreciate
nitpick, that's
I
just a fun
appreciate
treat.
movies like that are well thought out, but then you have a lot of sci-fi movies that over-explain every little thing.
Yeah,
I like
They
little
try to
like
say-
less
yeah,
is
you
better.
Don't, you don't have to.
I don't need to
mean,
be
I
spoon
agree.
fed.
as long as it's a good movie, as long as you're entertaining us and focusing on your characters
Yeah.
and their interactions, you
agree.
could say anything.
Yeah,
We'll-
we can
we'll
fill
be
in
on
the
board
blanks.
for
I
it.
can like speculate like how things work, but you
Yeah.
see how they work, and so I'm not really left confused.
I'm not angry at the film that camels were faster than horses. It was just something in the back of my mind.
That took me out of it completely.
No, I did think about that, and then I just said, they're used to sand, sure.
No, I bought that point when you just said they're better on 10. I was like, ooh, yeah, that's a
The
good
camel
point.
looks at the camera.
It's
It's
based
a living.
on absolutely no evidence.
It's a living.
And then if you want to poke holes too in the plot, like you would think that when the mummy is after the Americans to suck their organs dry, everyone's aware of that, but for some reason they leave them alone. And that's when the one guy gets like, get me a bourbon. And he's left alone. He gets sucked dry.
Well,
you would think
why
you
would
would
you
like,
go
why would
for-
you leave them alone if you knew the mummy's after them?
Yeah.
But
Why would you go for the
again,
guy with the bad eyes?
Yeah, I thought about that too. I was like, the one guy with glasses, you're going to take his
Oh,
eyes?
that's a good
for the
point.
movie?
Maybe the whole time the mummy had bad eyesight because he.
That's
couldn't
why
see
I thought
without
Evie
glasses.
was an oxygen. Because
He was blurry.
He just saw the hair.
I assumed because it was like just the first thing. The only woman in the whole movie is Evie, so he was just like, oh, a
Yeah.
female. This must be her.
Who else could it be?
He's grabbing Benny like, my
Next to
love.
the moon.
All right, gentlemen.
Love the
it
name.
looks like we're in agreement.
Yeah, another unanimous vote. I'm assuming.
I agree with the audience. I would probably raise it to an 80.
Yeah, I was about to
somewhere
say,
in the
though,
80s. Personally,
Yeah, I think it could be higher.
75%. That's like a solid good, not great. But maybe I would lift it to 80.
And again, I guess a lot of it is expectations. What are you assuming that this movie is before you even see it? But if you're just playing it and you have no idea, I feel like for most people this is.
I think it's quick to kind of understand like what you're in for. If you've never seen it before, you catch a scene on TV midway through. It's like you can totally understand what's happening, and like what kind of movie you're watching. So I credit to that. It's a very identifiable movie. You can recognize the soundtrack, and I think it's something that a lot of people are aware of. Like I think it's cool that a movie like this is still being watched and appreciated 20 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's not that's hard to do.
Right.
Well, we would love to know what you at home think. Hopefully you agree with us, and we'd love to hear it. But if you also think that this movie is a dirty butt poop movie, I'm actually very curious why you do that.
Yeah, if you're
please reach out to us.
Yeah, tell us your dumb thoughts and your stupid comments, and we'll ignore you.
We'll leave our email. We'll leave any Twitter, Facebook, Instagram links at the bottom. But yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on The Mummy.
Let us know if you side with the critics or the audiences and why. And, we'd like to have a discussion going even beyond this. So, thanks for listening. And we'll be back with you guys with another podcast soon.